I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to provide you with information and news that the old legacy media really does not want you to know about. We try to recover some lost history, and we try to explain the inexplicable. Today, from Madrid, we have the great pleasure and honor of introducing you to lawyer and author Irene González. Welcome to On Watch, Irene.
Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad and happy to be here with you.
Irene, you've written a very powerful, very important book called Save Europe, or in Spanish, Salvor Europa. And it does not have an English translation yet, an English publisher. But frankly, the reason we have you on this podcast is so that you get an English publisher, because this is a tremendous book. It's very important. You write some very powerful, very strong ideas and language in here that really needs to be translated and advertised to an American or to an English-speaking audience. So congratulations on the publication of the book. I understand it's in its third printing. Is that right? The third edition of the book?
It's almost in the third point, but yes, was published 3 months ago. I think it's, like you said, with your generosity, is a very powerful message, and in a moment is crucial not only for Europe, for everyone.
I agree with you. I had the privilege of reading an English version of the book, although not the actual publication. And I can tell you that you address some really fundamental problems, some civilizational threats that it applies to Europe, but frankly, it applies to the United States and many other places just as much. And you talk about a battle or a fight, a civilizational fight over spiritual identity and political freedom. How do you frame that up? How do you make that part of your story to explain the necessity to save Europe because of that fight?
Well, when I start to writing this book, I discovered we were not just in a cultural battle, ideologies. That was something deeper, something more serious. And I felt we are in a spiritual war. In that spiritual war about inside our civilization, Christian Western civilization, we have serious enemies. These enemies they are not any enemies. They really try to destroy our civilization, so we have to take them very serious. What is the frame? Where is the frame? Well, in theory, we live in a liberal world with democracy and prosperity. But my generation, who was raised after the end of the Cold War,
right.
I discovered, we felt a little cheap, because in Europe, we don't have that prosperity, we don't have that freedom, and we don't have actually anything. Our identity was expelled from our society. And I think my generation has been raised in conscience of lies. And we have to get back to the fundamental of a safe and prosperous society. That fundamental is the truth, is our identity, and of course is get back to fundamental rights that is bigger than us.
I think one of the sections, one of the opening sections of your book talks about this idea of the post-Soviet victory of liberal democracy, and that the idea of liberal democracy became higher than anything else. All of a sudden, this notion of democracy became almost godlike, a devotion to democracy, but at the expense of individual identity, individual human worth, the idea of family and community and civilization. All of that got pushed aside for this new god of democracy. And I think one of the people that sort of inspired you in your education said something, the quote is not exact, but it's something like, dying for democracy is like dying for the metric system.
Exactly.
It's a concept, it's a framework, but it doesn't have value in itself.
Exactly. You got absolutely the point. Democracy is a really great system, especially in the United States, that I think is more similar to a truly democracy than in Europe. But democracy is just a system. We have been living in an anomaly for over 200 years since the French Revolution.
Right.
There is no issue more important for humanity through history than God, an existential and intellectual need of mankind since the beginning of the time and across all cultures. And in Europe was erased God, and the new God of the postmodernity is the state.
Right.
Especially in Europe. And their religion is liberal democracy, and in the last century, the new religion in the version of socialism.
Yes. Yep.
With that, we lost something is natural of our existential, is we belong to a community. We have looking for all the time the dignity of humanity, and we need something to belong, an identity, a culture bigger than us, like you said very well. So now we live in a nihilist world, and our identity in Europe, what is exactly gender ideology? In the beginning, after French Revolution, I think the man was separated from God. After, the man was separate from the country.
Right.
After, men and women have been separated from them. That is the end of the family. And the last step is separate man from ourselves. So in that moment, we are actually like an absurd man with no identity, someone who doesn't love deeply anything, and if you don't love anything, you can't fight for anything.
Right.
That is the point exactly of the new serfdom of this time. If you don't love nothing, you don't fight for anything, so you produce to consume, and you are the perfect servant for globalists.
Yeah, it's this deconstruction. Deconstructing the family was a very big objective, and then deconstructing the individual. You talk about it as transhumanism in one portion of your book, this idea of neutralizing, of deconstructing individual identity to the point where you're just a servant of the state. I think another important point is what Margaret Thatcher famously said, and that no one ever went to war under the flag of consensus. Consensus is everybody agreeing about everything. And the world doesn't work that way. There's a reason why people have beliefs, and and civilizationally, I think it's important that what you talk about as Western civilization as being the foundation, right? Christianity and all the benefits, all the growth of Europe and all the traditions that we think of when we talk about the West, they're being actively attacked and destroyed. I'm going to quote one brief portion of your book where you talk about, if Western civilization is a structure of oppression, they love saying everyone's being oppressed, right? The old Marxist dialect. If race, gender, nation, children, or sexual orientation are oppressive, the way to achieve a better world is to do away with all of them, with Western civilization, and that means destroying the person. So a mestizo humanoid without gender, without homeland, without family, and servant of technology and drugs, whose God is the climate. That is the new de-civilization. That was a very powerful paragraph, and I think it sums up a lot of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm sorry because I'm better in Spanish.
Yeah, well,
than in English.
there's a language difference, but I mean that's that's the translation that I was working from.
Yeah. But there is the exactly point of everything, you know. And I think the next years with AI,
Right.
they are creating a new consensus about the AI knows everything, is perfect, it can't be failure. So where are you going to decide anything? In a democracy, we have to change, and we walk through a technocracy. It's a kind of tyranny.
Yep.
That they make all decisions in the name of a science, you know, false science is the globalists. They can take all the decisions, but meanwhile, who we are, what happened about our project of life, what happened with us? We are nobody. We're just without identity and with nothing bigger than us to really love. And if you don't feel truly love in this world, nothing has sense. Nothing has sense. You are the perfect machine to be a servant, you know?
This is the technocracy that you're talking about, that democracy even gives way eventually to a technocracy because the experts, all the experts know best. So don't argue, just obey, because the technical experts will tell you what is best for you.
But that situation is not about a future situation. We could see that COVID period, you know, in the pandemic was the perfect essay about everything. But in this moment, for example, in Europe, with the digital Europe, they are telling us that there is no more caste anymore, and it's for your best. We know better than you what is the best.
Right.
Caste is forbidden, but what really they are trying to do with this? Control, and manage everything. They are the true architectures of our lives. They really think they are our God. Why can they say something like that? Because we forgot God. That is, I think this is very important. And for example, when people ask me, what can we do? Well, oppose everything. Don't lose your liberty. Forgotten caste, for example, or everything. And they use two kind of characteristics about the modern man.
Yeah.
What is your comfort? They are always playing with your comfort. It's better for you. Don't bother. We are going to do this for you. this is something comfortable. And the second one, the fear. The fear is
Fear.
always,
Yep.
they are going to going after the crime, the fraud, and they are protecting you. There is everything. They are lies. They are incredible lies, and we have to be able to emancipate from that conscious and that lies. And if you allowed me, you said before something very important about consenso.
Consciousness?
Consciences. Yeah, consciences. Sorry. Yeah. That is the word that everyone wanna get. That is conscientious. Well, that is the end of the knowledge. That is the end of the really thinkers. You know, if everybody thinks the same, that is truly the truth. That is impossible. So I think it's like a tool for buy, you know?
There's a famous American political columnist or writer in the 1920s who said that it was the job of the government to keep people in a state of fear so that way they would always come running to the government seeking protection and seeking direction. Save us from whatever the latest thing was that was being used to frighten the people. And I think that the example that you just gave about fear being a technique to control people is completely consistent with that. It's the same, whether it's 100 years ago or today, fear is often used as a way to manipulate and to control people. One of the terms, one of the topics that you talk about in your book is something called emotional dictatorship. What is emotional dictatorship?
We could see very well with a woke culture, you know.
Woke culture, yeah.
Woke culture. It's very funny that our society, the only culture can produce is the cancellation culture.
Right, right.
That is, we belong to a glorious civilization full of beauty, full of kind, and now we only can produce cancellation culture. That is so sad for us. Emotional, were you asking me, is the new man, because they are creating a new man,
right,
and a new women, is someone who just feels like an animal. You only have sentimental.
Yeah, no intellect, no reason, just pure emotion.
Pure emotional, and you are very fragile for bigger lies. For example, if they are telling you, we are going to freedom your oppression to having a baby, for example, with the abortion, and you feel like a stupid animal, you are doing this for freedom. But that is not the real truth. That is not the real truth. The real truth, you are ending with the life of your own kid. That is so serious.
Right.
That is so serious.
Right.
And now is denying. For example, let me speak about something happened recently in United Kingdom. They made a law where you can make an abortion with 9 months of
right.
pregnancy.
Right.
I mean, we are worse than animals. What kind of society kills their own kids, the more vulnerable, but they don't feel anything for that?
In New York State, they passed a law allowing abortion right up to the moment of birth. And some could argue that it could actually give birth and then kill the child. So total, absolute abortion, no restriction. When they passed the law, the New York State legislature, the assembly, they stood up and they all applauded. Which to me, I mean, it's mind-boggling that a state legislature passes a law like that. And it wasn't just a matter that they passed it, they held a party. They celebrated over doing it. And so that gives you an idea of the state of civilization in New York, right? That's where they are, you know, mentally and in their heart, that they can do that, and they think it's great. They celebrate it, no problem.
Yeah, that is a proof we are not in a culture battle. This is a spiritual battle between the good and the bad, you know? And I think they are monsters. They are monsters. And for example, in many countries in Europe, they are saying in the name of law, in the name of democracy and the rule of law, we are deciding you can kill a baby just born.
Right.
Exactly, because your only God is democracy. Your only God is the law. And when your only source of truth and when your only source of moral and virtues is the state, in that moment, the politician, they can decide what is moral and what is not. And you are just a slave of the indignity of this society. That is why it's necessary we have to recover, especially in Europe, recover the truth and what is create a civilization. Something you understand that the truth can be decided with a majority. You know, maybe the law is permit this crime with babies,
right?
But that doesn't mean it's moral. That doesn't mean it's moral. And if something is moral, you have not the right, you have the duty of be a stand up against that. That is our duty as human beings. Exactly.
You're exactly correct.
And it's terrible because, for example, in France, that situation is protected in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So, in what way, for example, someone like me can be put the Constitution or have any respect? What kind of respect? So, there is a reaction, especially with young people, that we really need something else than a state and something else than law, because they are not justice. They are not together with virtues, not values. You know, virtues maybe something deeper.
Yeah.
And we need just to recover the truth. That's all, and our dignity and our identity. So we don't have too much time, because I think the destruction in Europe is incredibly in advanced stage.
Yeah, it's an advanced stage. So in addition to that sort of internal historical destruction, the de-civilization of Western Europe, there's another angle of attack. There's another challenge to the traditional history, culture of Western Europe, and that is Islam. There's an Islamization of Europe. And explain how you describe it in your book. How do you talk about the challenge of the Islamization of Europe?
Well, the Islamization is so powerful tool to destroy our identity, to destroy Europe. Why is so powerful the Islamization? Well, there is several moments that you can see where we are under attack. The first of all is no more security in our streets. When you make a process, because there isn't, I'm not speaking about the natural immigration. Immigration is a natural process from all times, and it's normal. But we are not speaking about that natural process. This is managed
Yes.
from our politicians.
Yep.
They open borders totally and came here mass immigration. I'm speaking about millions in short of years to Europe. And what is the purpose? Africa is not place in Europe for all Africa, for example, and there is not place in Europe for all Pakistan or for Bangladesh.
Right.
For example, they thought if you put a society, for example, if you take the whole Bangladesh and you move to United Kingdom, do you really think there is no consequences?
Of course.
It's impossible. That is the multiculturalism. And in the name of the new values of the super state European Union, the biggest enemy of the Europe.
That's true.
That is diversity. That is good. The multiculturalism is our strength. I'm speaking about speeches from our politician, the chief of commission, the European Commission. Multiculturalism is not our strength. Diversity is not our strength. Strength is everything is lies. So the first of all, when you create a process where is human traffic, this is very important because, for example, when millions of African came to our coast in an illegal way, that is traffic humans.
Right.
And
it's criminal.
Exactly. And that organization, they are receiving help from the European states. So when you are see a process criminal and you don't do anything and you support with money, you are a member of the criminal organization, and that member is on the state. That is the real truth. But that is the process. Insecurity in Europe is totally fact. For example, Sweden is a country I speak in my book, was the most safe place in Europe. Was very clean, beautiful, quiet. Right. Now it's a nightmare. A criminal organization is a great place for them. You cannot afford this problem when you bring millions of Syrians, millions of Muslims to this country. It's not rational.
And the other thing is that if you go back 10 years, Angela Merkel, then the Chancellor of Germany, there was never any debate, there was never any vote. Just with the stroke of a pen, she opens the doors in Germany, and for that matter, for the rest of Europe, but she led the way with respect to Germany, allowing unlimited, what amounts to illegal immigration, come into Europe. And her decision then affected all the rest of Europe, because we all know that Germany has an outsized, an oversized influence on how the European Union works. And so no vote, or first of all, no debate, no discussion.
Consensus.
No vote. And she signs a piece of paper and says, go do it. And this is supposedly democracy. Right? It's a lie. The whole thing is a lie. It's a falsehood.
But it's a criminal lie.
Yes.
That is the worst. what happened? Let me remember a couple of data about Angela Merkel.
Yep.
She allowed 2 millions, 2 millions of Syrians in the moment where ISIS in Syria, ISIS war,
Yep.
they came to Europe. They spoke, we can integrate 2 million of people in 3 years. 2 million of Syrians you can integrate in Germany? How? With money. Okay, it's very important that we have to understand mass immigration is an incredible business for someone people, but is a total disaster for our civilization. In the name of democracy, in the name of diversity, and you have to be a good citizen, we are going to spend millions and millions of euros in integration.
Right.
What is the real meaning of integration? Is another lie. We don't understand our world if we don't understand the evil doesn't know the language of the truth.
Correct.
The truth. The evil only can lie. Well, they spend 100,000 millions of Europe in 3 years. Where is that money? Is it really there is a real integration with Syrians, with Afghan guys? Really? No, it's just like a revolutionary tax. We pay you a salary every month, and you don't kill me.
Right.
There is,
Right. Yeah. You're being held
exactly.
hostage in your own country.
Exactly. So you are recognizing
Yeah.
that they are the owners of this country right now. But in the middle of that business, maybe Syrians and Afghans get a salary, but in the way other people get a really big business. But in the meanwhile, women, we are scary in our own street. There is incredibly rise of sexual crimes in Europe. Then is with no reason. In the same point, the mass immigration start in Europe. So is a crime? What happened? They are speaking. Oh, they are immigrants. They are poor. We have to protect them. What happened with women? Who protect women in Europe? Who? Nobody. Nobody. We have to start to speak about victims of multiculturalism. And victim of culturalism is all the society, especially women, especially kids, and not only with crimes, is, for example, with salaries.
Right.
What happened when you bring millions of people? What happened with salaries?
You drive down wages.
Drive down.
The poor get poorer.
Exactly, exactly. But what happened is really changed the life in the neighborhoods for poor people in Europe. So is horrible, is diabolic, this mass immigration. But let me say something about that. It's not only illegal immigration, because in Europe we are speaking of third generation. For example, in France is one of the most Islamic country in Europe.
Right.
It's so sad to say that, but it's true. Every day, per one church is destroyed, 2 mosques are built. So it's obviously the great replacement of population. What happened in France? We are not speaking about illegal immigration. They are in the third generation from, for example, Morocco. And what they are fighting for France? No, they are fighting for an identity, ethnic society who lives besides the France society.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and they with the mass immigration, you only got the war in your own street. That is what you get with mass immigration, and is illegal. Is not only the problem; is the change of something very important, electoral base. Electoral base.
Yep. It comes down to elections because then they'll end up ratifying or having votes cast to support and encourage the crisis that they created. Right? It's like it's self-ratifying.
For example, in United Kingdom, I speak and I explain better in my book about all the process in different countries and
Right.
what happened. But what happened before the last years in United Kingdom? If you allowed me to say, I think is completely late for United Kingdom. It's
Sure.
just down. It's destroyed. Not only elite, not only the head of the government is corrupt all the society. What thought leftists? They thought, okay, if we change mass population, electoral base, if we change electoral base, they are going to vote in us because we are giving them salaries for no work.
Right.
That is the real truth of the welfare. Fair that is the real meaning in Europe. Okay, in the beginning, Muslim vote for progressive in United Kingdom. But what happened with the second and third generation? Well, they present to the election, and the last election were in Arabic language,
Yep.
no
Yep.
English. There is no English in United Kingdom in many elections because they are the new representative. So for this way, you can change not only a government, you can change the sense of the republic, for say, to an Islamic republic. Why? Through the democracy. They are moderate. They tell you they are coming to a democracy, so
Right.
they are welcome. I mean, it's completely insane. It's
Yeah.
completely insane.
Yep.
You know the book from Hollebeck,
Yep.
Submission? That is exactly the point. Islamic population through the democracy get into the institution. And it's right, it's perfect because that institution, what exactly identity belongs? Gender ideology? Really? So that is necessary to recover an identity and recover the cross in Christianism. Why is so important get back to the cross? Because when a space is empty, there is nothing, or there is a constitution that allowed abortion for 9 months.
Right.
When you don't have anything else to say what is moral, what is the truth, you only have that, and state, a lifeism system. What happened when the rest of the world don't live in that lie? They really believe in a God. They really have a strong identity. What happened? You just be erased. You are just be erased. What can be just a strong wall across the cross? The cross is something that means everything, means the world for us, you know? If you don't believe in God, okay, that is not the problem. You just have to decide what kind of civilization you want for your society. If you want Islam, what means Islam? Submission. Submission. There is no other meaning for Islam. Or what do you want? A world with virtues in dignity, in justice, in truth, dignity of humans? Well, decide what kind of civilization, because the cosmovision of our religion creates different civilization, believe or not in God.
Irene, you've written an incredibly powerful book, and you've said things and you have written things that, I'll be very frank, you don't see it in many other places. There are a few other very good authors writing important books, but what you've consolidated here in a very powerful argument, it really needs to be published in English language publication for an English language audience. Have you taken a lot of criticism? Have you taken a lot of people, very upset and very angry about what you've written? See, the problem is, it's all true. So when you write the truth, you usually get in a lot of trouble.
Well, but this truth is so powerful, and my language in my book is the language of a fighter. Then the evil don't make criticism about my book. That will be published for my book. What is the method in Spain? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist, you know?
Right.
And that is exactly the worst. I only receive, and I have to say I'm so grateful, good criticism, and people who is very always saying thanks to say this, thanks for be brave, and thanks for telling the truth and explain what happened in Europe, and that is very touching for me. And when someone against this read this, what they do, they don't criticize because that is, is a free free publicity. So they just don't exist, put under the table.
I understand.
Because it's so powerful, they can say it's a lie. I only, and I too, use something is very important in the postmodern society is the freedom. Islam, for example, is getting consolidating in many places. For example, hijab, in the name of freedom, they tell us. Oh, that is why a chapter of my book, the name is The Liberal Hijab. Is their freedom? Is their freedom to destroy my civilization? That is not true. But there is something bigger than democracy. There is something bigger than gender ideology. So we have to get back our truly identity, and it's the same identity our from United States, because we share the civilization, the Western civilization, based on a fundamental of Christianity. And I think is a very, very important questioning many things. For example, freedom, liberty is something important. It's something so important. But you have to ask, freedom for what? Freedom for destroy my civilization? You don't have that freedom.
Right.
I'm sorry, but you don't have.
Right.
So you have to get something so powerful to make this conversation. And this conversation they don't want to have this conversation. That is a problem.
You're
But
exactly correct. Yeah. Irene,
the
Irene, if our viewers and our listeners want to follow your work, follow you, whether it's on social media or articles that you write or television that you do, how can they follow you? We're going to put links to your work into the show notes when we release this podcast. But for folks listening or viewing, how can they learn more about you and follow your work?
They can follow me on X, and my nickname is Irene Freedom.
That's an easy and direct, simple Irene Freedom. It's very good.
Irene Freedom. So we are freedom fighters, actually. Hijab is not for freedom. We are for our freedom. And on Instagram, for my name, Irene González.
Very good.
So I'll text you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of On Watch. The book, again, in English is Save Europe, but Salvor Europa. It's in Spanish. We want to get it into English, so somebody out there help us out. We need a publication to get it into the English language press. A powerful book, a very important book, and we appreciate your taking the time to join us and to talk with us today. Thank you again.
Thank you so much to you, Chris. I'm very honored to be here with you, and I'm very, very happy to see you again, talk about these important things about our civilization. And I'm very, very, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you.
You
so
are very
much.
welcome. It was great to have you on. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Farrell, On Watch.